Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in with us tonight. I'm Stacy Wright from Phoenix MUFON, and tonight we've got James Keenan as our guest speaker for the Phoenix MUFON live streaming lecture series. James's presentation tonight is going to be great. It's going to be catastrophic events and lost knowledge. We've had James up on the stage at our Phoenix MUFON meetings a couple of times, and he's given us some great information on his personal research around the Skinwalker Ranch area, and then some great archaeological strangeness too. So you're gonna love this talk tonight. And James Keenan, you're on.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today at MUFON. I'm just gonna get my screen ready. So I'd like to first thank Stacy and Shane for giving me the opportunity to present my newest presentation. Thanks Alejandro as well. Quickly, for those of you that don't know me, I'm a fictional author that likes to incorporate real life events into my works. I will also soon be a non-fictional author with my first non-fiction book out, hopefully by February of next year. And that's going to be about my travels, including around and in Skinwalker Ranch. Prior to this career change, I was an investigator. My investigations encompassed everything from law enforcement, criminal investigations to private investigations, insurance fraud, and arson investigation. Now I like to research and investigate what I enjoy, which are the topics of otherworldly or other dimensional origins, portals, past catastrophes, and our loss of ancient historical data. My educational background is in anthropology and archaeology. I would consider myself an avocational archaeologist. But now, regarding my lecture today on catastrophes and lost and forgotten knowledge, I want to start out by covering what I believe took place to our planet and its inhabitants, and then delve into the potential evidence, including oral and written historical data and ancient artifacts. These items being used to show that we have lost knowledge of who or what was here before us. So I want to start off by telling you there seem to be discrepancies between what my college professors were trying to peddle to me about past cultures and civilizations versus what I was seeing and finding when I was out in the field. Don't get me wrong, some of the techniques used to collect data are solid, and science as we know it today is, well, it is what we must work with. So I will include the current science with some of the unorthodox knowledge and data collection. And remember, when dealing with social sciences such as archaeology, much can be left to interpretation. Many current beliefs are subjective data points that some scientists would like you to believe as stone hard facts or unchangeable evidence, but that's just not the case. In a prior lecture, I discussed ancient anomalies pointing toward past worldwide catastrophic events. I explained that through the course of my research and investigation over the years, I zeroed in on 4 potential catastrophic events that could be seen taking place in historical data, both oral and written, or at least permanently documented by them. I then covered 2 of those catastrophes. If you attended and remember the lecture, one event was when the planet Venus may have wreaked havoc in our solar system, and the other was or were large solar outbursts. The historical data points towards all of these having potentially occurred, and some may have been more than once. In our modern day civilization, we have historical records going back several thousand years. The further that we go back, the more this data becomes sketchy, difficult to verify what did and did not occur. Here, I want to start off by showing the following 8 major disasters modern man has suffered through. And I know you're able to read them on your own, but just started at the top, 1931. You have the China floods, where up to approximately 4 million people were killed. And then if you continue on to the right, in 1887, you had the Yellow River flood. And I'll give you guys just a second to go through that. And remember that this is what we know about currently. And, you know, after putting this together, I don't think I'm going to make any trips to China. They seem to have really, really bad things taking place. Now, these are the 5 deadliest known tsunamis. Unfortunately, most of us were around to remember the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which happened to claim the most victims, which was almost 228,000. And then down to the Lisbon earthquake in 1755 and the Minoan eruption. And these are the photos or drawings of the aftermath of those tsunamis. So why are we lacking records on ancient past cultures and civilizations that preceded our current civilization on planet Earth? So think about this. In the upper left photo, we have an event. Let's call it Event 1. This event destroys a city. Those in that city are gone, but the entire planet can move on. Then we have Event 2 in the upper right. This event is 1 order of magnitude stronger than the first event, meaning it's 10 times more powerful in destruction. It destroys 10 cities. This is terrible, but as a planet, even as a nation and a state, humanity recovers. Now we have Event 3. It's 2 orders of magnitude stronger than Event 1. That means that 100 cities are destroyed. Pictured as a super volcanic eruption, devastation is at a global level. Catastrophic indeed, but can mankind survive? Yes. There would be major differences in how life continued, but we could adapt and continue forward. But now we have Event 4. This is 3 orders of magnitude stronger than the first event. It is catastrophic with worldwide losses. 1,000+ cities are destroyed, and its effects will take years to level off, returning the Earth's surface to livable levels. In some of these events, or even larger events, it is estimated that 99% of the human population perished. Other species, even possibly those that were human-like, did not survive, erased from the historic record. I'm sure you're asking yourself, where is he getting this data from? Well, the data comes from ancient indigenous cultures from around the world, and we'll go into specific details and cite several specific sources soon. This timeline is during the currently known and accepted occupation of the species, Homo sapien. Notice the archaic period is on the far left, present day on the right, with the blue box representing time that we have historical records for. Many of those records are hazy. Notice how small of a space it occupies on the timeline. Now notice I have included dates showing major period change events, most relating to physical Earth change. The dates shown are BP, meaning before present. January 1st, 1950 is the commencement date for this measurement time, and it walks a path with radiocarbon dating that starts in this era and takes into consideration atomic bombs that were detonated in the atmosphere. And then just closely, a lot of people are familiar with the 12,800 BP, the Younger Dryas. There's a lot of presentations on that. And then around 4,400 BP with what was more than likely Noah's flood. As you can see on there, there's these instances, multiples, called the Heinrich event. The Heinrich event is a natural phenomenon in which large groups of icebergs break off from glaciers and transverse the North Atlantic. It was first described by marine biologist Hartmut Heinrich. They occurred during 5 of the last 7 glacial periods over the past 640,000 years. Now, in one of my first lectures, I discussed the changing of the world symbol found in petroglyphs in detail, and that they showed a world change happening because of a major catastrophic event occurring. This symbol is what the ancient indigenous people used to record an event of this magnitude. The tilt of the Earth's polar axis remains constant, but describes a circular path in space during a period known as the Great Year or precession of the equinoxes. Remember, it is as the observable phenomena of the rotation of the heavens. This time period is about 25,800 years. This is galactic time, and when you look at catastrophic events taking place, they seem to fall around 25,800 years. Then you split that in half and you see them around 12,900 years, and you split that again to 6,450 years. And again, you're seeing things like the Great Deluge. So this is meaning that something disastrous is taking place in a potential cyclical pattern while Earth, the solar system, and the Milky Way are hurtling through space. So we are losing records, history of past human occupation, maybe even other intelligent species occupation of Earth because of these cyclical time period catastrophic events. Every time something bad happens, humanity is plunged into another archaic period, a dark age. Some species, other civilizations, were not so lucky. When you talk about major upheaval geologically and in a catastrophic manner, almost anything on the planet's surface could have easily become lost to future civilizations. And also remember, there have been one-off catastrophic events. The blue explosions on the timeline represent potential major catastrophes. Look where they fall on the timeline. I'm showing these three because potential evidence still exists for these that have been collected. And also remember on that YDB, which is the Younger Dryas boundary, that's the impact event that you're familiar with from Graham Hancock. Before it was termed that, it was really known for, or known as, the Clovis Comet hypothesis, which was 12,800 years ago. Now I want to discuss the other two potential global catastrophic events, different from my first lecture where Venus and solar outbursts were excellent culprits in the extinction of so much life on our little planet. Here we have the Hopi Prophecy rock near Orabi, Arizona. This rock art foreshadows an Armageddon type scenario. It most likely is capturing the ancient understanding that we will end the fourth world and begin the fifth world. But in order to do so, we must cross through great destruction. The ruin or destroyer will come from the southwest sky. Several Hopi leaders state that the destruction will be by nuclear arsenal. But I believe the ancient indigenous people meant cosmic destruction or other form of atomic destruction. Let us discuss potential cosmic destruction first. This will be in the form of high energy cosmic rays. This energy will look like a blue-white star, which are in many mythological traditions from cultures all around the world. And just real quickly, how those worlds ended. The first world ended by fire, the second by ice, the third by a great deluge. And some of the indigenous cultures already put us in the fifth world and say the original was destroyed by unknown creatures or monsters. Sometimes it makes you wonder if it might have been what they considered the gods or giants. It's pretty interesting. When particles and cosmic rays collide with the atoms in top of the atmosphere, they burst, tearing apart atoms in a violent collision. The particles from that explosion then keep bursting apart other bits of matter in a snowballing chain reaction. This is a rendering by NASA of high-energy cosmic rays. Scientists hope to one day better pinpoint where in the sky they come from. Every square kilometer of Earth only sees about one of these particles per century. We believe these come from starburst galaxies. But what if all galaxies act this way, releasing massive amounts of these particles all at once in a central explosion, and it's repeated around the same time period as the galaxy continues to hurtle through space? They're so powerful that once in contact with our magnetosphere, shock waves will be created, being heard and felt. And what if all that energy became more charged and they kept it because it was coming into contact with dark matter, which we know nothing about? Finally, guess what the charged particles and cosmic dust will most likely look like? They're going to be blue in color. Blue. It may likely look like a blue blob hurtling towards us in space, quickly engulfing the planet. So measurements taken of the black hole at the center of Home 15A galaxy reveal it is 40 billion times more massive than our sun. Could black holes or some other unknown celestial body or event in the nuclei of a galaxy be the creation point of this anomalous energy? And just a side note, black neutron stars were just found to exist. It is more massive than any other collapsed star, yet lighter than a black hole. So what else is out there that we know nothing about, just waiting to be discovered? And just to put into perspective what the Earth looks like to the sun, you can see that tiny, tiny little pebble at the very bottom by Neptune and Uranus, and then the sun with comparison. So the black hole that we discussed is, in the last slide, 40 billion times larger than the sun in this slide. So there is now a considerable amount of evidence indicating that the nuclei of spiral galaxies periodically enter an explosive phase where they release large amounts of energy in the form of relativistic particles, mostly like electrons. This means the speed they travel is comparable to the speed of light. These mega outbursts are now known to be the most energetic phenomenon known to scientists. Based on scientific data collected on Seyfert galaxies, which are bright, compact core with strong infrared emission, it is reasonable to infer that the center of our Milky Way galaxy spends 20% of its time in this active state, making it interesting to consider what effect explosive outbursts from the center might have on our solar system and Earth. So Antonella Castellino, an Italian astrophysicist with the Piero Jure Observatory, explains, the highest energy cosmic ray particle ever recorded, called the Oh My God particle, was some 2 million times more energetic than the most souped up proton propelled by the Large Hadron Collider, which is the world's most powerful particle accelerator. This just shows we do not know what is out in the universe. We're still infants to science. Now, the other catastrophic event that potentially occurs in cyclical nature does not have extraterrestrial origins at all. As a matter of fact, this event originates in the center of our own planet. So consider the fact that the planet Earth is very much like many other structures in the universe. From an atom to a star to a complete galaxy, everything has a nuclei that is a central structure upon what all else is built. If a star and a galaxy give off neutral matter, which explodes as it becomes energized, we are discussing such particles as photons, neutrons, neutrinos. Why not planets as well? This concept would make more sense for why catastrophic events occur on a somewhat set schedule. Think about it. Think about what the repercussions would be if something disrupted the Earth's inner electromagnetic structure. It would be like shutting down the dynamo effect for a very short period, enough to cause major catastrophic events. So with matter escaping from the inner core to the outer core in an irregular manner, there is a literal atomic explosion inside the center of the Earth. Rotation of the planet would stop for just a blink of an eye in galactic time. Consider that period 12 hours or less. Unfortunately, those results would be catastrophic. So a book titled The Adam and Eve Story was written back in the early 1960s by Chauncey Thomas. It discusses what would happen if this type of event took place. Chan, short for Chauncey, pulled from many scientists that had many different backgrounds. Some of those scientists were J. André de Luc, Georges Cuvier, Dolomieu, and Christian von Buch. He also was very fond of taking from Professor Frank C. Hibben. What is also very interesting about this book is all the misinformation about it. So most people have been told or believe that the book was pulled off shelves and classified by the Central Intelligence Agency. Almost every website online incorrectly states this. Well, first, this book was never classified top secret by the CIA and removed from the public. What happened was someone filed a Freedom of Information Act on what the CIA had on Thomas. Well, his book happened to be in the file they had, so they released it. This made people incorrectly believe it was classified. The book has always been available. It was just very hard to come by. It still is, the original at least. Also, Thomas added to it years later and brought out another version of the book. More than likely, Chan had requested to work for the CIA, and he was being background checked, so they had the book. But what's really interesting, and no one has really discussed this, at least through all my research online, is that someone in the Central Intelligence Agency updated the book. They changed parts of it, they added to it or subtracted from the original. They made corrections to the book, and this showed that the agency was quite interested in what Chan wrote about, and at least someone there believed what he stated was the cause and effect for such a cataclysmic event. Also interesting to note, Chan Thomas was hired by Dr. Robert M. Wood in 1966 to work for McDonnell Douglas. They hired him because he was a psychic that apparently could communicate with aliens. Some of those at McDonnell Douglas believed Chan could assist them in learning how to properly get out of Earth's orbit for a future space launch, just like UFOs were capable of doing. And this was confirmed by Jacques Vallée, and then again in 2008 in a MUFON article. Gotta love MUFON. This is the author. The CIA believed his explanation for the geophysical mechanism that allows pole shifts to happen. When you break down his work, he was stating that Earth's crust only remains strong enough to avoid a pole shift when the Earth's magnetic field is strong. When it breaks down, the massive amount of ice weight on the poles caused the land holding the ice weight to shift and slip, pulling everything around the globe with it. I'm not going to go into the mechanics of this and how it's possible, just because it would take a very long amount of time. And one other thing about Chan, between 1974 and 1993, he was basically nowhere to be found. Well, guess who his employer probably was at the time? CIA. Now, this is found on the very first page of the Adam and Eve story. We're immediately made aware of the geological makeup of our planet. On the original version of the book, page 24 discusses where the physical North Pole was located, giving time periods in BP, again before present. And again, I'm not speaking of magnetic north, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about the physical North Pole. This may be hard to believe. I still consider the implications of such a model, but when you consider the fact that if the Earth quit rotating for several hours, this does not mean the wind would stop. The wind wouldn't stop. It means that you have 1,000 plus mile-per-hour winds, followed by tsunamis that we could never fathom, followed by activations of most volcanoes, most supervolcanoes and earthquakes that could not be measured. The sound coming from beneath our feet and above our heads would be deafening. The speeds of the wind would shred almost everything in its path into nothingness. 99+% of our civilization would be wiped out, leaving pockets of survivors in another dark age, not being able to start over for hundreds of years, just trying to survive until events on the surface subside. And that means where would we survive? Below ground. I personally believe that we will hear what I can only coin as an aching or a moaning in the earth. Sound waves coming up out of the planet are going to be heard. This would be prior to the event. I often picture and hear in my head a wind instrument of such magnitude going off that entire cities might hear these strange sounds, giving notice to the community, to the cities. Not really notice, more like revelations of the future event. And I use that word, revelations, because that just seems to be what the Bible is. It seems to be talking about these reoccurring events. So you may want to conduct your own research into such topics in reverse flux patches, outer core movement, which is through convection. And if the iron core of our planet is made from BCC iron, and BCC means body-centered cubic, if the iron is in a body-centered cubic phase, where the atomic architecture of the iron is hexagonal, especially with the amount of heat being generated and the amount of pressure the central core is under. We really may want to take Chan in his book as seriously as someone at the Central Intelligence Agency did. So these two photos show the location of the ancient Sumerian cities of Nippor on the left and Uruk on the right. I'm showing these so that you understand how difficult it is to locate ancient remains, even as large as a city. As you can see by looking around in the photos, there seems to be nothing extending out into the deserts of Iraq for miles. Yet a massive civilization flourished here thousands of years ago. In the book, The Sumerians by Samuel Kramer, he goes on to tell his readers that no one knew about Sumerians until the mid-1800s. Nobody knew they existed. Their civilization lost to modern-day man. Yet eventually their culture and civilization was rediscovered. Today we cite this civilization as being one of the oldest known to current man, and do not even realize that their discovery was recently an accidental. See, archaeologists were looking for the Assyrians mentioned in the Bible. Neither the Greeks, the Hebrews, or the Egyptians of ancient times had any knowledge of the existence of the people or language of Sumer. It just did not exist. The mention of Sumer had been erased from the memory of man for several thousand years. And at first, scientists and historians even refused to believe that a new lost ancient civilization had been located. Again, we were talking about the mid-1800s. That wasn't too long ago. Did you know that the only reason we deciphered Sumerian language and text was because we had already deciphered Semitic Akkadian, known in earlier days as Assyrian or Babylonian, which was also written in cuneiform script. The key to the Sumerian script was found in Old Persian, which is an Indo-European tongue. So now let us start looking around the world and unlocking lost history and lost knowledge. Quiquilco pyramids, definitely not the shape of pyramids you're used to seeing. We have lost knowledge of structures and the people that populated them from 3,000 plus years ago. And again, I personally believe this culture was much older than what we're currently being told. So really, how easy is it to lose historical data on the past? Well, it's very simple. Just consider the fact that we have most likely only discovered 5% or less of the past civilizations buried directly below our feet. We're living on top of the past. The only thing that we are sure of about those that created these circular step megalithic structures in what is now Mexico City is that they were wiped out by a very large volcanic eruption. Now this is Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. It is old, but not an ancient site by any means. It's also the most visited site in all of Mexico. What I find important about this site are two things. I'll discuss the second towards the end of the presentation. The other is directly behind me in the photo. Notice that the Maya and almost all Mesoamerican people were obsessed with tracking the cosmos. Their observatories looked like those that we have today. Very advanced. It makes you wonder when and where those advancements took place. Now this is the Great Pyramid of Cholula, Mexico. It is the largest man-made pyramid in the world, dwarfing the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramid is 1,476 feet wide, 217 feet tall. From end to end, the Great Pyramid of Cholula is equivalent to 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's 4 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It also retains the title of the largest monument ever constructed anywhere on Earth by any civilization to this day. And that's that we know of so far. Obviously, we can discover something, which I hope. Archaeologists state that the pyramid began being built around 300 BCE and was completed in 6 stages, requiring workers from many different generations. But I believe it is much older. So in June of 2016, I explored the underground shaft tunnel system that's off limits to the public. I learned that below the pyramid is an intricate system of tunnels and caverns that could have housed 100 or so people deep below the structure above. Those caverns and tunnels go on for miles. The site would have offered safety from any pending dangers above ground. This includes massive amounts of devastation and destruction that could have been caused by a major catastrophe. The lower areas most likely were built and used even before the Great Pyramid of Cholula was built above. As a matter of fact, I believe the colossal megalithic structure above was built to honor and preserve where the ancestors had to go through to survive for a very lengthy period of time before they could come back up to the surface. This is the Cockney Stone in Scotland. It's 15 by 8 meters in size. It was buried back in 1964 to protect it from people. In September of 2015, it was unearthed again for 10 days by archaeologists from the University of Glasgow to verify it existed and digitally document the large stone art. That's pretty interesting. Don't you think that since 1964, we were questioning if it even existed? So here again is another example of historical data being lost just over a minute period of time. So the Cockney Stone, it's considered to be the finest Bronze Age cup and ring carvings in all of Europe. Its meaning to this day is highly debated. What does look to be older carvings sure looks to be a map of sorts. Some believe it to be of cosmological mappings, other of geographic areas of the United Kingdom. But I believe that we're seeing both. It's a bit of both, and I'll explain it. What if we're discussing a map of prior underground habitations where people lived after a great catastrophic event occurred? I've been inside many cairns, and looking at the rock from above, I see just that, cairn locations that may be strategically placed to match stars, planets, constellations, and other objects in the sky. Could this mean that we are looking at an earlier archaic period attempt to create an early warning system? These are the Clavicarns of northern Scotland. They're currently believed to be over 4,000 years old. I would put this date back even further. This area was quite possibly a stronghold for surviving the last great catastrophe that took place approximately 6,500 years ago. At first, survival would have been underground, followed by habitation placement above ground, but still on top of the prior habitation sites. And that's what we're seeing. So much of the ground at the site obviously is visibly raised. Just look at the photos here that I took. And guess what? There's cavities below, ladies and gentlemen, where people easily could have lived. So here we're going all the way back to the Americas. This is Izapa, Mexico, near the Chiapas. This is Stela number 2. The photos from the anthropologic studies of Izapa, Mexico. This is the principal bird deity. But look closely, and what do you see? Aerial ship, tree of life to humans, and anthropomorphic creatures. Aerial ship, above the tree of life to humans, and what look to be male, female with child giving thanks to their deity. Some anthropologists will state the two glyphs that have an X in them on the wings of the deity represent either Zip, which is the sun, or Wo, the Maya zodiac symbol for the period of August the 15th to September the 3rd. But I've been a follower of this symbol for the past 24 years. I believe it represents origin, meaning our creator or creation period. Is this a specific being or period of birth for humanity where we came out of the bowels of hell and re-entered the above world realm? Either is possible. Then we have the Olmec. The word Olmec is not what these ancient Mesoamerican humans called themselves. Olmec is a Nahuatl word for rubber people. They used rubber, and it was a prized commodity of trade. The rubber balls for the Mesoamerican ball court games were extremely important in their culture and future cultures that preceded the Olmec. The Olmec are important when I'm discussing things that do not match up in historical data. This Olmec sculpture is supposedly from 1200 BC to 700 BC. The symbol of corn god is on the back. Look how unique the facial features are and the shape of the head. I'm showing this because what we are being told is incorrect. We're missing very important historical data. You're looking at an Olmec Hunchback. Up until approximately 65 years ago, anthropologists refused to believe that there was an older culture that was largely found in the Veracruz area of Mexico. They stated this was just impossible. Fast forward, and here we are. But guess what? Now we are slowly starting to find data and artifacts on a pre-Olmec culture. We also now know that the Olmec were all over Mexico, including on the west coast. So look at this sculpture carefully. It's an oversized Asian man, right? No, this is an Olmec sculpture with one of the oldest known Mesoamerican glyphs on its chest, which, by the way, they cannot read. Unknown what it means. I believe it's an important general, originally from the Orient, or a now missing landmass that was located in the Pacific. The glyph seems to be like ancient Chinese glyph customs. We're told that this piece is 12th century BC. Now look at the facial features on this artifact. Just pull up Terracotta Army and compare the facial features. Yet again, this was found in the Olmec region of Mexico and is 100% Olmec. We have what is labeled Olmec male, 12th century BC. Again, we have obviously lost tremendous amounts of historical data due most likely to multiple catastrophic events taking place. Olmec again, but with red hair. That's what it is. It's red hair, and it's dated 12th century BC. So now this is from the Gilchrist Museum. It's an Istlan del Rio style hollow seated female ceramic figure from Jalisco, Mexico, dated around 300 BC. It looks identical to many ancient Persian artifacts, resembling what we have been taught to call the jinn or genie. An ancient race of humanoids said to predate humans, and falling from the grace of God, they were sent to a different plane or dimension to exist. Maybe that was to a different side of the planet. This is Mexico City National Anthropology Museum. Do you see the potential of, again, a Persian male jinn here? Yet again, dug up in Mexico and having nothing to do with other parts of the world, per current day anthropologist. Mexico City Anthropology Museum. Again, personally, I'd like to relabel this for them as the Jinn Collection, but they're currently labeled as Olmec in the museum. Now let's turn direction and focus on petroglyphs and pictographs. This is Grapevine Canyon, Nevada, just outside of one of my favorite places, Laughlin. It's a cosmic event leading to a plasma event. So the cosmic event is topside with the plasma tree below. This glyph's patina shows it to be much older glyph compared to many of the other glyphs in the area around it. And the glyph faces southwest. It makes you believe that that's where the anomalies were taking place in the sky. And again, just quickly, I know I went over this in my first lecture, but for those of you that have not seen it, and it is on my YouTube page if you want to go back and see part one. It was videotaped live at Phoenix MUFON. But quickly, I believe the petroglyph symbol on the left is the plasma tree, and on the right, the universal stickman, to signify a major plasma event taking place in the sky above. Plasma being the fourth state of matter, which is hot ionized gas. The same formation takes place in the lab when physicists work with plasma. So if you saw this forming up in the sky, there was a pretty good possibility that it was the last thing that you were going to be observing on this planet and in your lifetime. This is the Parowan Gap, Utah. It's known as the Zipper Glyph, what is potentially a major cosmic event wreaking havoc on the surface of Earth. Whatever happened was followed by plasma discharges inside the planet. Great objects later fell from the sky. Time was also being kept on this rock. How much or for exactly what is unknown. Now this is White Tanks, Arizona. It's a star explosion. The year is 1006, and this is confirmed, ladies and gentlemen, including the year of 1006. I added this photo to show that our ancestors keep track of what was going on in the sky and the important stuff they jotted down for future posterity. They wanted to make sure it was remembered. This is in Utah. It's tracking time for a long duration, a long period. From the glyphs around the Tixon line, it looks to be cosmic, plasma, and potentially earth-shaking events that were being data recorded. Now, analyzing this rock art made me believe that one sky event led to multiple events on the planet that led the people in this area of Arizona long ago to go underground. Of interest is when I was using my GPR, my ground penetrating radar, I found a large underground cavity below all the rocks at this location. It was coming back most likely as a cave. Unfortunately, it's state property and you can't do anything to it. Can't be touched. This is Deer Valley Petroglyph Preserve. It contains thousands of petroglyphs and pictographs. This location is just west of Phoenix, Arizona. The site was estimated to be 10,000 years old. Multiple indigenous peoples were here throughout history. The Hohokam and the Batayan are two of the cultures we know about, even though we're not sure who they really are or where they went. But here's what makes this site of great interest. There are much older cultures that were here, as seen in the rock art style. Who they were, absolutely no idea, but they were old. So old that ASU anthropologists are currently trying to redate the site, stating that origin looks to now be between 12 and 13,000 years ago. And guess what period that is? 2 catastrophic events back. This is one of the most interesting glyphs at the preserve. This, by the way, is one of the older glyphs. I love showing it because I know what it looks like to me. I'll leave it to your imagination, what it looks like to you. Now let's head down to South America. When I was at the University of California, Santa Barbara, I had the great privilege of being taught by one of the very best archaeologists when it comes to ancient cultures of South America. His name was Dr. Mark Aldendorfer. I always considered him the real deal Indiana Jones. No one spent more time in Peru and Bolivia than this man. He even looked the part. We had many conversations after class on the topic of archaic civilizations in that part of the world. When I would tell him my theories, he would always tell me that I'm off the beaten path and to not speak about crap that didn't happen. He always liked to tell me, don't talk about the crap that didn't happen. Yet I would explain an artifact or find and he would dismiss it and me, refusing to talk more on the topic. In a book that he assisted in bringing to life, Advances in Titicaca Basin Archaeology Part 1, the anthropologists go on to explain that there are so many important sites all over the area of Lake Titicaca that other anthropologists working elsewhere in the world would fall over in amazement. Yet almost all the sites, many of which are easily visible to the naked eye, have not had a single study or excavation conducted on them. Most of the field work has taken place only at Pucara and Tiahuanaco. This study of the two sites is documented going as far back as the early 1600s, with a huge uptick in the fieldwork starting in the early 1970s. In Advances in Titicaca Basin Archaeology, Part 1. This is followed by the lead author naming a huge laundry list of anthropologists and archaeologists that had helped create what we know about this incredible area of the world, and those that lived there long ago. What this book fails to mention are the scientists and pseudoscientists that also made huge strides and contributions in the area's known ancient history. It was just that their work and findings completely went against and contradicted what the experts say took place and what they want you to believe is gospel. What I want to do now, though, is take you down the other rabbit hole. We're going to go the other direction. So now we need to discuss two megalithic sites that are really connected to each other, or were part of the same cultures and civilizations in what is today Bolivian Peru. These are Tiahuanaco and Pumapunku. I want to start this off by discussing Hans Schindler Bellamy. I consider him one of the original conspiracy theorists, ufologist, paranormal investigator, megalithic researcher. He was a researcher and author. Interestingly, and I just recently found this out, his name now looks to be a pen name that was used in his English written books. His real name was most likely Rudolf Elmeyer von Westenbrug. What is even more interesting is that he had the rank in the SA of Obersturmführer during World War II. This was the paramilitary of the Nazi army, and his rank was equivalent to lieutenant colonel. He was well connected and highly regarded among the ancient astronaut society in Zurich, Switzerland. So he had the means and connections of the time to get tremendous amounts of that time unknown data and information about the South American locations. And I know you all saw Indiana Jones, right? Well, here you go with the real Nazi interest in the past cultures and the civilizations. What he argued about in his book was that both sites, now above 12,000 feet, were originally located at sea level. He argued that something so catastrophic affected the planet that the sites were instantly thrown up miles into the air. Nearby Lake Titicaca could also quite possibly have originated as being part of the ocean off the shores of Peru. He goes on to explain that there were multiple occupations of the area and multiple builds, each group building on top of or attaching to what the last group of humans at the site started. It is possible that these groups of people were not even related. Rotation of the Earth and location of the Earth in the solar system may even have been different at the beginning of occupation. Additional books written or co-authored by Bellamy continue with evidence and examples to help his theory. Again, Hans Schindler Bellamy. If you can find this book and are willing to shell out about $80 to $100, I highly recommend it. It's difficult to find and expensive, but it's a great, great read. Other books like From Ancient Arts of the Andes by Wendell Clark Bennett show incredible megalithic buildings and art that we no longer see today. Both the buildings and art seem to assist in showing that what was going on at Tiahuanaco and Pumapunku has been lost to our current historical data. Remember that most of this stuff laying around was moved off-site to some museum, ruining the ability to conduct future research. This is, again, From Ancient Arts of the Andes by Wendell Clark Bennett. Now, scientists say there was no written language used at these sites. But this small fragment that has engravings on it clearly looks like Olmec and Maya glyph writing. Just remember, we're discussing locations and finds in South America. So it makes me wonder, did it start in South America and go upward, or Central and go downward, or elsewhere? Now, if you get most of your information from those shows on cable, Little justice is being done when it comes to the two sites of Tiahuanaco and Pumapunku. What you mostly hear about are H-style bricks, large blocks, and what is on this slide, the Gate of the Sun. We are told that the city peaked in population around 800 AD with approximately 10 to 20,000 inhabitants. What gets mostly left out is the amazing amount of work that took place around the turn of the 20th century by one Arthur Poznański. He was a well-respected avocational archaeologist that settled in the area and began an extensive field investigation of the megalithic sites. He would later date the sites to being 11,000 to 17,000 years old. Modern day archaeologists insist the site is no older than approximately 2,000 years. This is mostly due to their incorrect carbon-14 dating and the fact that anthropologists insist that people that inhabited Tiahuanaco had no written language. Many have heard of Poznański, but he is not the key in my historical review today. Instead, here is what is important. Poznański went back to Europe and presented his findings. From this, he got 4 very important scientists to spend the next 3 to 15 years of their lives down in South America conducting research that had incredible finds and implications on the history of our planet. This data and most of their work was intentionally buried or discarded by modern day scientists and the universities that most of them work at, as usual. So we have Dr. Hans Ludendorff from Potsdam Observatory. He was a German astronomer and astrophysicist. We have Dr. Arnold Kohlschutter, who was an astronomer and astrophysicist from the Bonn Observatory. Dr. Rolf Muller was an astrophysicist from the Astrophysical Institute of Potsdam. And Dr. Friedrich Becker was an astronomer of the Vatican Observatory. That in and of itself is pretty interesting. They all set out to Tiahuanaco to carry out astrographic studies and check the astronomic archaeological investigations of Poznański. Over the next 15 years, they would write multiple books and articles on the topics of these two sites and other archaeological sites in South America. One of the more important writings, if you have time to read, would be volume 14 of the Beisler Archive. Pages 123 to 142, and Beisler is B-A-E-S-L-E-R, and it's under Archive, A-R-C-H-I-V. It composes the original work carried out in the Temple of the Sun, which is also known as Kalasasaya. This extensive work should have attracted the attention of the scientific and pseudoscientific world. But since their findings were on such a huge, complex subject that defied then and now archaeological standards and belief, there were no persons willing to conduct investigations into the matter and with research goals to check these incredible finds. So here is what they found. They realized there were 3 different periods of builds. Period 1 was so far back before periods 2 and 3 that they had to continue checking the data for several years. Eventually, they had to come to the belief that the data was not wrong. Again, not wrong. Their data was correct. The data showed period 2 beginning 15,000 BCE. This made them deductively reason that period 1 began at or before 20,000 BCE, ladies and gentlemen. Their findings also showed that the building that took place in period 1 used far greater math and had much better design and construction work. But the scientists scratched their heads and asked how that could be. For that to be true, they realized that archaic man could not have just come out of caves during the dark ages of man and begin constructing monumental megalithic structures. It would have taken additional thousands of years for those period 1 builders to learn that advanced technology and science. They also questioned why period 2 construction was not better than period 1, but inferior. What they also could not understand was how could such a large population of people survive by farming and husbandry at such a high elevation. Further research and data collection led them to believe that Tiahuanaco and Pumapunku were at sea level during and prior to Period 1 build. Now, this is what they studied, researched, and drew conclusion from. And remember, these are astronomers and astrophysicists, ladies and gentlemen. So first, the draining canals in the area had lost their linear form through movement of the subsoil, and they were laterally entirely twisted and curving. This could have only been done by uplift, then instantaneous lowered elevation, followed by another intense geological uplift. Second, the scientists showed that the entire temple of Kalasasaya was a true solar observatory located on the astronomic meridian, at the same time making it a magnificent stone calendar. Again, remember, this was during Period 2 build. Now, third, the astrophysicists recognized that there was a difference of approximately 18 angular minutes, which represents the change in the obliquity of the ecliptic between that of the period when Kalasasaya was built and that which it was during the time of measurements being taken, which was around 1930. Fourth, the pilasters, which are the rectangular columns of the Sun Temple, worked in hard andesitic lava, were tested and data documented for erosion change over time. Comparing their erosion with that of the works of the Period 3 show a massive space of time transpired between Period 1 and the other two periods. Mind you, most of what we see on the History Channel or Discovery Channel is only Period 2 and Period 3 build. The Gate of the Sun is from Period 3. The far more precise build and material is mostly below ground or still in the quarry, too heavy to have been lifted after Period 1, which had far superior construction and technology capabilities. Here's additional proof that the German scientists gathered as well. One, it is evident beyond a doubt that the inhabitants of Tiahuanaco knew animals now extinct, which they reproduced on their ceramics and other artifacts. These creatures most likely disappeared at the end of the last period of glaciation on the Altiplano. Two, certain human crania found in the deepest strata of Tiahuanaco are completely fossilized. That takes great periods of time to occur. And finally, for the strange factor, in the Period 1 archaeological record of the Altiplano, around where the two sites are located, people were not living in homes. They were still living in semi-subterranean dwellings, including temples and dwellings for the ruling class. In these dwellings, people remained and slept in a squatting position. This practice in the area continued into Period 2 and 3 in some places. So how in the hell did these people from Period 1 build such megalithic structures, then return to their underground home to squat for the night? And this, again, is a completely archaic style of slumber. Could these structures have been the works of the gods or deities of old? Who were they, if this is true? And were those living in the area just the manpower used to build the incredible structures? Here's something else I wanted to point out that gets little attention. When you look at the tectonic plates that the Earth's land masses are located on, look closely. Most of the land matches their plate. There are two minor exceptions, which are the Cocos Plate and Philippine Sea Plate, where there is not matching landmass. And then there's one major difference. That's the Nazca Plate. It's over in the far left. We're missing a large landmass at this location. The eastern border of this plate is also one of the most active areas for tectonic plate shifting, causing some of the largest earthquakes experienced and recorded in our known historical data. One other point to my argument: Nazca Plate subducted under the South American continent. Geologists consider this a fact. Well, guess what? This would mean intense uplift, quickly where the Andes mountain range is. This is the most likely reason for the Andes paradox. The orogeny here makes little sense, and orogeny is the the folding and compression that causes the mountains. So this Andes paradox is where the largest mountains in the world, or some of the largest mountains in the world, also happen to be the youngest in age. From Ancient Arts of the Andes by Wendell Clark Bennett, the glyphs again look to have order, direction, and meaning. They look like other ancient glyph writing from around the world that is yet to be deciphered. The Atacamino were a culture within the Inca period, possibly slightly older. Their artifacts were very similar to those found at Tiahuanaco. So maybe they were the descendants of those ancient people found at Tiahuanaco, so there might be a bridge gap in cultures. From the book again, Ancient Arts of the Andes by Wendell Clark Bennett, look what is being described. It's tapestry. The tapestry is only being considered representational art. Well, let me show you what the page in Bennett's book is discussing, which are ancient South American tapestry from the Tiahuanaco areas. These are the ancient tapestry, and I've enlarged the view for you. Give you a moment just to look at that. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a record, not an overall decorative art pattern. Look closely at the symbols. They are identical to glyphs in ancient languages from around the world. They are in set patterns with repeating symbols, showing they meet the definition of written language. We just cannot translate or decipher the meaning. And just quickly, and I'm going to climb up on my high horse here for a moment, I want you to truly understand how important it is to recognize that part of the problem with information dissemination lies with the inexperienced, the casual history buff, or the once in a while internet searcher who tend to trust the opinions of so-called professionals without checking their reasoning and how their facts are acquired, researched, and distributed. Take, for example, this tapestry work that is sometimes known as tokapu. During the time of the Inca, the ruling class wore this type of tapestry as clothing. Along came the historians. Well, actually, I don't want to give them that much credit. Let's call them the chroniclers. They saw this type of dress being used by the elite and decided that this clothing and their patterns would represent Inca nobility. Suddenly, the historical data presented on the tapestry became more about quality and the fabric of the work, thus giving little thought to the design, which really turns out to have a literal meaning. Because of this, this same belief system continues to be used even up until today, with one professor teaching, the next generation and the next generation and the next generation the same incorrect information. Okay, I'll step back down off the high horse. Moving on. Sometimes we come across artifact finds that are of a stone, oddly shaped with some type of indentation or hole in it. There are glyphs or symbols on the stone. And many times the stone is considered a rune stone or having magnetic properties. This is one at the Gilchrist Museum. It's from Puebla, Mexico. Its ancient glyph is on one side. It's unknown origin, ladies and gentlemen. Key to a Stargate? Maybe. This is a Marumuru Stargate next to Lake Titicaca, Peru. It's also known as the Gate of the Gods. But look closer. I want you to focus in at the smaller of the two doors. Directly in the middle, we have a somewhat circular indentation, quite possibly for a key of sorts, something to activate a doorway. So most of you will recognize this stone. Georgios Tsoukalos did an entire episode about it on In Search of Aliens. I personally believe the stone was recently created out of a strong magnetic rock, but there's still a couple of points to be made here about the design in general. Again, design in general is my focus. First, how it is carved is important. In portal theory, there is a good possibility that matter is flipped during the transfer from one point to another, meaning the moon and sun go in one direction and face the opposite on the other side. So the design is implying that a reversal event occurs. Second, this size, stone, and shape almost fits perfectly into the hole in the center of the Amarumuru lower door. So maybe someone copied what they saw when making this. And by the way, this subject matter on stargates and these types of artifacts being gate keys also happens to be part of my fictional book, 10/22/2036. And obviously the truth is always hidden in the fiction, hint, hint, hint. Now, this is the gateway of Midas City and Eskişehir, Turkey. The area is known as the cradle of civilization, very similar to what we find near Lake Titicaca. It's extremely hot here, just like where we are currently in Phoenix. The entire front that looks like a temple is a large facade. Why create something like this in the middle of nowhere? Well, guess what is located midway on the facade doorway? A circular opening, approximately the size of the portal key or portal stones. And my reason for showing stargates, because we have lost the ability to use them when we lost the knowledge of their existence. People have asked me why I think these are portals or energy bridges. And my response is that to activate a portal, I believe 4 ingredients are necessary. One is electromagnetic power. This is the energy part of the equation. Second is something that controls them. Maybe different key has a coding for a different location. Where you want to go, you place that key into the door hole. Third, you would need to be able to turn a solid into faster moving molecules, breaking the tight bonds and allowing for a liquid or matter to be the transfer mechanism, meaning something that physically encompasses your molecules, includes them into the mix and transports you directionally. This would be sound frequency and wavelength, causing a change in the matter at the subatomic level, vibrating, its vibration. And fourth was correct alignment between latitude and longitude on the planet, or correct directional alignment if going interplanetary. And this is where we're currently messed up. When these portals were possibly in use, we were currently or correctly aligned. Some catastrophic event had the potential to interfere with this and change how the Earth was aligned. Currently, we lost historical data on how this all works and what corrections would need to be made to get this technology back and for it to be working again. And obviously find the portal keys. Last year I was at Tiahuanaco. Tiahuanaco is in Mesoamerica. It's in Mexico. In Mesoamerican archaeological, Tiahuanaco is a Mesoamerican archaeological site located on Costa Grande of the Mexican state of Guerrero, near the small town of La Soledad de Maciel and the larger town of Zihuatanejo. The name Tiahuanaco means place where people control eternity. The site and pyramid are over 3,000 years old. One of the cultures known to have occupied the location are the Cuitlatecas. 20 years ago, archaeologists stated there were no large sites and no large past cultures living on this side of Mexico. That was just 20 years ago. Yet now we have a site that is over 10 square miles in size. The pyramid in the photo is unique to say the least. It is completely covered in a clay that has lasted thousands of years, most likely longer than 3,000. The clay also caused quick plant growth and alluvia coverage to bury the pyramid after the site was abandoned long ago. If you know anything about clay, it only seems to last for a short period, maybe around a decade. It's always having to be patched up. Many have attempted to recreate the clay that's found on the pyramid. All attempts have failed. I think one person that attempted it even tried adding blood to it, was what we were told. Interesting. We're aware that the area was devastated not once, but twice by extremely large tsunamis. The stairs on the left enter the inner part of the pyramid. They have purposely not been excavated to keep people from entering and taking artifacts that may be contained within. The right shows damage to the pyramid that was recently done when the archaeologists in charge of the excavation decided to use dynamite. Yes, dynamite. To remove the soil, shrubs, and debris because he thought it would be quicker. Brilliant. This is the top of the pyramid structure. There is a small step site pyramid in the rear. Yeah, you can see it in the back behind me. Also is a square built directly in the center on the left. This square is incredibly important. As a matter of fact, 4 other structures on top of hillsides and mountains, all within a 25-mile radius, precisely line up with this square build on the very top. It is not the structure on the top that's important, it's what's below it. There must be some sort of power source deep below that can be accessed. Reason why I believe this is that my wife and I were shown multiple photos from different people of UFOs directly above the square. Ladies and gentlemen, we saw like 3 or 4 different types of UFOs. They didn't look the same. We were also shown a cell phone photo of what looked to be a deep, rich purple energy coming up out of all 4 sides of the square and going directly up into the air. The energy was like, it was so rich in color that it looked like purple velvet drapes, something that Elvis would own, coming up out of the ground on each side of that square. My point to all this is that we've lost information and historical data on energy, technology, people, and other species from our distant past. And many megalithic structures also seem to be directly attached to the UFO phenomenon, and we do not know the reason why. Maybe it's the energy below. Only 1% of the area has been excavated at Tiahuanaco. So look what is right next door, another pyramid, covered by hundreds, if not thousands of years of jungle growth. This is what they look like with everything on top. I want to stress again, just because we learn about one culture at an ancient site does not mean that was the only culture at a site. Early cultures or civilizations could easily be forgotten about. Their artifacts and history accidentally blended in with more recent occupation of the sites. This was shown extensively earlier in the South America portion I discussed. This causes errors in correct dating of artifacts and causes errors in who created them. It wreaks havoc with creating a proper timeline of when the site was occupied and obviously by whom. And I'm not even going to go into what I think of carbon-14 dating. Especially think about it, if these catastrophic events took place, what did it do to the molecules in the air, in the atmosphere, on the planet, on the ground? It changed them all. This was found at Tiahuanaco. Looks Olmec or pre-Olmec. What were the Olmec doing on the Pacific coast of America? Remember, 65 years ago, they didn't exist. Then we're told, okay, they exist, but only in the Veracruz area, which is off the Gulf of Mexico. This looks pre-Olmec, but they labeled it as Olmec, so I'm going to keep it as that. Look at the unique head structure and symbol embedded at the top. This stuff is not supposed to be here, ladies and gentlemen. It's pretty cool. Oh yeah, and I really don't know what to call this. The anthropologist who my wife and I talked to for quite some time in the back office labeled it anthropomorphic. He seems to feel it represents maternity. Look at it. It sure does not look like any pregnant human being I know. From Tiahuanaco. Now moving away from Tiahuanaco, Crete Phaistos disk, we obviously have repeating symbols in some type of readable pattern, signifying language and data being recorded. It has meaning, right? The symbols, I'm pointing same symbol in 3 spots all over the disk, is found throughout the world. Again, how this can be makes no sense to modern day social scientists. But common deductive reasoning would have me believe that people around the world had an origination point in common, where the symbols and language a long time ago were all the same, or there was long distance travel, somewhere being conducted by ancient humans or others on Earth. Now this is Frontier Times Magazine, March 1967 edition. That's like this cowboy and Western magazine. I just happened to come across this in a library in downtown Mesa. Not a library, but a bookstore. It's pretty cool. Look how similar this symbol is to those found on the Phaistos disk and all over the world. This was a glyph carved into a rock in Roswell, New Mexico. I have found no other reference to this rock art, but when I'm back in Roswell, I'm going to be looking for it. So we have Coba, Mexico ball court, Yucatan Peninsula. It's a decent sized representation of the ball court for the east side of Mesoamerica. And remember I said 2 things interesting about Chichen Itza? This is it. The Chichen Itza ball court. It's the largest known Mesoamerican court to date. It's massive. There are stela and carvings discussing just how important the game was to those living in Chichen Itza long ago. Now this is Tiahuanaco again, ladies and gentlemen, a Mexico ball court on the west coast. Crazy. So check this out. It's pretty big. It's huge. So it's the 2nd largest Mesoamerican ball court to have been found so far. Why the hell is it needed on the west coast? Why are we seeing and finding so many ball courts? Some of you have been here. It's Pueblo Grande ruin, downtown Phoenix. Over 200 ball courts have been identified in the Hohokam region of Arizona, with more than 30 found in the Salt River Valley alone. Although the presence of ball courts in North America had been noted in the archaeological literature as far back as the 19th century, initially no one knew what they were for. Currently, scientists believe they know what the courts were for. Most of you have been taught that they were for ceremonial battle, giving thanks to the gods. You've also been told that the losers most likely were killed in sacrifice to the gods. Well, did you know that many different styles of play were in use? It mostly was based upon what location the courts are located. Some were played with rubber balls being hit with your hip. Others played using their hands, some with sticks, others with pucks. And other areas look to use the court for tournament play of all types of games, commencing all together. The dress of the players was incredible, to say the least. Many of the outfits looked like the players were ready to board a spaceship and head out into space. But here's something that is rarely discussed. The ball courts most likely were created to mimic something, maybe a story from ancient history that was so important to the inhabitants that they based a large part of their culture and daily life around the event. It was sacred for a reason. That potential reason could very well likely have been to mark something that took place that was of such a large scale that the originators of the game did not want anyone to forget. They wanted to remember it and pay their respects. But over time, the game and its true meaning were warped. At some point, few knew what the real meaning of the game was about. But for this to happen, large periods of time had to elapse between the original event and the time that the games changed and how and for why they were being played. Maybe someday we'll come upon some type of historical data that was not destroyed by the Spaniards during the time of conquest. So look at this subject matter closely. You and I do not look like that. It's labeled by anthropologists as anthropomorphic, full of ritual meaning. I continually tell people, ancient people drew, carved, and molded what they saw. Some may have been from dreams or hallucinations, but come on, not everyone back then was taking narcotic substances to get high, see things, and then create things from what they saw. This is Gilchrist Museum again in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Believe it or not, it has one of the best collections of Mesoamerican artifacts. This piece is from Guerrero, Mexico, 600 BCE, unknown culture. Very interesting headpiece and clothing. Gilchrist Museum, Hacha style, Veracruz, Mexico, labeled as, and I'm telling you what I saw. It says older than most things, but unknown date. It's just a very interesting subject matter. Gilchrist Museum and has stumped all anthropologists. Its unknown location of origin or type of culture, and it's listed as ancient. They know nothing about it. Gilchrist Museum, Nayarit female, 300 BCE. What female do you know that looks like that? Again. Mescala culture of Guerrero, Mexico. It dates 300 BCE to 300 AD. This is from Ancient Arts of the Andes by Wendell Clark Bennett. This is the Mochica. They're pre-Inca out of the country of Peru, 300 to 1200 AD. Look at what they were seeing and attempting to memorialize. Possible this is from Guerrero, Mexico. It's listed as unknown subject matter, unknown date, questionable style. Very interesting subject matter. And real quickly, I want to cover the Dropa stones of the Himalayas, even though I have not been to this part of the world, but it'll lead into the last slides of my presentation. These were a collection of 716 groove stones discovered in 1938 and later in 1965. They were found in man-made caves with skeleton remains of tiny bodies, less than 4 feet long and having oversized heads. No one could understand the glyphs on the stones, and so they were filed away for 20 years. The script glyphs were later deciphered. The stones told of a spaceship landing on Earth 12,000 plus years ago. The race of people called themselves the Dropa. Not many took the stones or translations seriously, thinking them to be fake. Interestingly enough, the story went along with, here we go, oral traditions. These oral traditions stated that there were beings, small men with yellow faces and bright blue eyes who came down from the clouds a long time ago. Russian scientists later tested the stones and discovered that they contained high levels of cobalt and other metallic elements. When they were placed on a turntable and subjected to high-frequency sound waves, they began to oscillate, showed indications that at one time they had been electronically charged or had formed parts of an electric current. The area around the caves are still occupied by two tribes that measure between 3.5 feet tall and 4 feet 7 inches tall, yellow-skinned with thin bodies and disproportionately large heads, bright blue eyes, which is a typical Asian trait. I added this in before showing and discussing these. This artifact is of great interest to me. I flew to Salt Lake City to visit with the owner, Victor Camacho. It's still hard for me to fathom what these artifacts coming out of Mexico have as subject matter on them. I'm still somewhat skeptical, and I'm currently continuing research on the matter. When things get better, I plan on making a trip to Mexico to attempt documenting proper excavation of an artifact such as this, or to show that it cannot be excavated because they're unwilling or it's just not from the ground. But several pieces in Victor's collection, and I saw 53 pieces, were unique and caused me to scratch my head and wonder if something like this could be for real, showing a lost culture and civilization. Even different species existing several hundred miles from where I'm sitting. This specific piece is of great interest. Pitting and deterioration look to be from natural aging and what would be expected from being buried in the ground for extended periods of time. I found no proof of recent tooling, no metallic deposits. It does not look to have been tumbled or sanded. Parts of the carvings are lost to time, which is what would be expected of an authentic artifact. The glyph looks to match writing found elsewhere around the world, a mixture of ancient known cultures and writings we know are authentic, but to date have yet to be code broken or properly translated. You see right there the E symbol. It may very well have something to do with human genetic coding or at least human origin teachings. The E symbols found throughout the ancient world's artifacts, mostly unknown and elusive in true meaning to social scientists. This is another artifact out of Abuelos de Jalisco. Again, it is owned by Victor Camacho. I spent a full day with he and his wife up in Salt Lake City area researching his collection. Look at the inlay material into the main stone carved object. I held this piece and examined it for well over an hour. At no time could I find any new material showing that the stones were placed into the main carving recently. This means that all the worn down material is as old as the main carving. That takes great amounts of time to accomplish naturally. Cracks and pitting were also formed naturally along all surfaces, sometimes right over a carved space or design. I'm still hesitant to say all the pieces are authentic, but I can tell you that several of the pieces are truly ancient, meaning aged. I also believe some of the pieces to be copies made thousands of years later, but still over 1,000 or 2,000 years old, meaning these were already being copied by later Mesoamerican cultures. So ladies and gentlemen, today I wanted to start out by explaining 2 of 4 potential catastrophic events that may very well have taken place, with hints and remnants of historical data still available, showing these may have occurred in the distant past. I wanted to show you that there are things, objects, artifacts, oral tradition, myths, megalithic structures, and other anomalous items pointing towards things in our distant past having been very different from what we've been taught and have been told by the experts, the scientists working for governments and universities around the world. I wanted to show specific examples I have researched, both through on-the-ground investigation and many hours of scholarly research through books on the internet, in museums and bookstores. Even though I present evidence and show science behind events, I'm still very open to what people in our day and age are willing to believe. I've spent years in search of energy portal, lost cultures and civilizations, only to find the possibilities that these subjects I have studied are intertwined with other entities that are from elsewhere. Where that is, I have my own beliefs and theories on. How everything fits together is a puzzle many are trying to find pieces for and fit together. At some point, I'm hoping we are told about facts already known to some that are currently being hidden for selfish reasons, or that we discover new facts and evidence before they too can be buried away with the rest. My next step is to follow up in great detail on the ET artifacts coming out of Mexico. I also continue to spend great deals of time on the Uinta Basin in and around Skinwalker Ranch because of the fact that this area is one of few places on the planet that still seems to have these power sources we're unaware of that are active and functioning, causing the ability for paranormal events to continue daily, maybe even along the line of portal usage. So I'll keep you all updated if you're interested. My most recent fictional children's book was released just a few weeks ago. It makes a great gift for kids, grandkids, that are in the 4th to 7th grade. It discusses real locations on the Uinta Basin, meaning in and around the ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. It incorporates Native American culture and shape-shifting into the story. It is part 2 of the UFO and an Alien. I'm hoping to enlighten the next generation of ufologists, cryptozoologists, and paranormal investigators. Hopefully it puts this subject matter into perspective and shines a positive light on the phenomena. Thank you all very much. What I'll do is let me flip over to here to the main. And let's Stop sharing. All right. All right, are there any questions, and how do I get to those, Alejandro? Not sure. Okay, here we go. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I know I ran right up to the hour and a half. I apologize. I just wanted to make sure I got all the information out to you. Yeah, the border is closed unless you're to Mexico, unless you fly or take a ship. So you can still go in, but unfortunately, all the sites are closed and all the museums are closed. So I could go to Abuelos de Jalisco, but I want to do other things while I'm there, just in case it turns out to be a bust with being able to do a proper excavation. Neil asks why I believe them to be stargates or portals. Basically, I go into more detail also in my first lecture too, but I believe that we had a portal system. You can find these type of structures. There's one in Armenia. They look very similar to each other. They seem to have this same type of key or location where something can be placed into it. And again, like I said, I believe that it requires an energy source and also the ability to also have some type of sound frequency to cause vibration to change the rock formation. And then again, it required alignment. But the indigenous people all over the world still consider this a gateway to and from where the gods are. So at some point, in order for these myths or folklore to have taken place and for that to be thought, something more than likely an actual event took place for that to become myth, since so much myth turns out to be reality.
Sorry about that. My microphone wasn't working earlier. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I think the only other question, any photo or video of the purple light? I see was a question from earlier.
Yeah, so we were supposed to receive that and I never got it. It's on the individual cell phone. So when I am back in Mexico, that's on my to-do list. Obviously, it's going to cost me to get the other photos because everybody expects payment. But the purple energy I've already paid for. So I should be able to get that when I'm there next time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Alejandro. Thanks, Stacy.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for joining.